The morning sun was just beginning to stretch across Meadowbrook Elementary School when Charlotte noticed him. A tall man in a dark jacket standing across the street watching. His hands were buried deep in his pockets. His eyes followed the children as they laughed and ran toward the school gates. Charlotte had been a security guard at Meadowbrook for 11 years. She knew the rhythm of the mornings. She knew the parents, the teachers, the delivery drivers. She even knew the neighborhood dog walker who passed by at 8:15 every single day. But this man? She had never seen him before. Something about the way he stood made her uneasy. He wasn't moving. Wasn't checking his phone. Wasn't waiting for anyone. Just watching. Charlotte tightened her grip on her walkie-talkie and kept her eyes on him. Her instincts had never been loud like this before. A cold knot formed in her stomach. If you love stories that remind you to trust your gut and protect the people who matter most, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. The children kept flooding in. Backpacks bouncing. Voices bright with excitement. Parents waved goodbye from their cars and drove off, trusting that their kids were safe. Charlotte's job was to make sure that trust was never broken. The man took a step closer to the crosswalk, then another. Charlotte's heart began to race. She moved toward the gate, positioning herself between the children and the street. Her mind was running through possibilities. Maybe he was a new parent. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was harmless, but maybe he wasn't. She had read the stories, heard the news reports, seen the warnings sent out by the district office. Strangers who didn't belong. People who waited and watched until the moment was right. The man's eyes shifted. They locked onto a small group of children near the fence. 3 little girls, no older than 7, giggling over a drawing one of them had made. They were distracted, vulnerable. Charlotte's pulse pounded in her ears. She pressed the button on her walkie-talkie. Main office. This is Charlotte at the front gate. We have an unknown individual across the street. Male, dark jacket, approximately 6 feet tall. He's been watching the children for the past 5 minutes. Static crackled. Then a voice came through. Copy that, Charlotte. Do you need backup? Charlotte didn't take her eyes off the man. He was now standing at the edge of the crosswalk. 1 foot on the pavement, 1 foot hovering over the white line. She said quietly. But stay alert. She moved closer to the girls, her body language calm, but her senses screaming. She smiled at them, keeping her voice light. Good morning, ladies. How are we doing today? They looked up at her with bright eyes. Hi, Miss Charlotte. You 3 should head inside now. The bell's about to ring. They didn't argue. They gathered their things and skipped toward the building, completely unaware of the danger that might have been waiting. Charlotte turned back toward the street. The man was staring directly at her now. No pretending. No looking away. He knew she had seen him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air felt heavy. The sounds of the playground faded into the background. It was just Charlotte and the stranger, locked in a silent standoff. Then, slowly, he smiled. It wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that made her skin crawl. The kind that said he knew something she didn't. And then he started walking. Not away from the school. Toward it. Charlotte's breath caught in her chest. Every instinct in her body was screaming. She moved quickly, stepping directly into his path as he approached the gate. Her hand rested near the pepper spray on her belt. She kept her voice steady, firm, but not aggressive. Good morning, sir. Can I help you with something? The man stopped a few feet away. Up close, she could see more details. His jacket was old and worn. His shoes were scuffed. His face was unshaven, and there was something hollow in his eyes. Something that made her feel like she was looking at someone who had nothing left to lose. He didn't answer right away. He just looked past her, toward the school entrance where the last few children were disappearing inside. I'm just passing through, he finally said. His voice was flat, empty. Charlotte didn't move. This is school property, sir. If you don't have a reason to be here, I'm going to have to ask you to move along. His gaze snapped back to her, sharp, focused. I'm not doing anything wrong. I didn't say you were. Charlotte kept her tone calm, but her body was tense. Ready? but we have policies. For the children's safety, I'm sure you understand." The man's jaw tightened. For a moment, Charlotte thought he was going to argue, or worse. But then he took a step back. "Just one. I was just looking," he muttered. "Looking for what?" He didn't answer. His eyes drifted again, back toward the school. Back toward the windows where small faces could be seen moving inside classrooms. Charlotte's stomach twisted. She pressed the walkie-talkie button again, never taking her eyes off him. "Main office? I need Principal Dawson at the front gate. Now." The man's expression changed. Something flickered across his face. Panic? Anger? It was hard to tell. But he knew his time was running out. "I don't want any trouble," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I told you, I'm just passing through." "Then pass through," Charlotte said, her voice harder now. Away from the school. For a long, tense moment, neither of them moved. Charlotte's hand stayed near her belt. Her mind raced through the training she'd received. How to de-escalate. How to protect. How to act if things went wrong. Behind her, she heard the door to the main building open. Footsteps approached. Principal Dawson's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Is there a problem here?" The man's eyes darted toward the principal, then back to Charlotte. He looked trapped, cornered, and that made him more dangerous. "No problem," he said quickly, backing up another step. "I was just leaving," good Principal Dawson said, her voice calm but firm. She stood beside Charlotte, arms crossed, her presence adding weight to the moment. "We'll make sure you find your way." The man stared at them both for a few more seconds. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. His pace was quick, almost frantic. He crossed the street, glanced back once, and then disappeared around the corner. Charlotte let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking. Adrenaline still pulsed through her veins. Principal Dawson placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing, Charlotte. That was good instincts." Charlotte nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the corner where the man had vanished. Something about this didn't feel finished. It felt like the first chapter of something bigger. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked quietly. Principal Dawson's face was serious. "I don't know. But we're calling the police. And we're going to make sure everyone stays alert." Charlotte's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from the district security coordinator. It was a photo. A grainy image from a surveillance camera at another school 2 towns over. The same man. Same jacket. Same hollow eyes. The message underneath made Charlotte's blood run cold. "Attempted abduction yesterday. Suspect still at large. Approach with caution." Charlotte's hands went numb. She looked up at Principal Dawson, her voice barely a whisper. "He was here for a reason, and I don't think he's done." The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers, one older with gray at his temples, the other younger and sharper-eyed. They stood with Charlotte and Principal Dawson near the front gate, reviewing the photo on Charlotte's phone and listening to every detail. "You did everything right," the older officer said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You kept yourself between him and the kids. You called it in?" "You stayed aware," Charlotte nodded, but her mind was somewhere else. She kept seeing that smile, that cold, knowing smile before he walked toward the school. Happened at the other school. She asked. The younger officer pulled out a tablet, scrolling through a report. "Yesterday morning, around the same time, a man matching this description tried to lure a 9-year-old girl away from a playground. Told her he had lost his dog and needed help finding it. A teacher saw it happen and intervened. The man ran before anyone could stop him." Charlotte's chest tightened. "And no one caught him?" "Not yet," the officer said. "But now we have more information. More sightings. We're getting closer." Principal Dawson crossed her arms, her expression grim. "What do we do now? Lock down the school?" "Not yet," the older officer said. "But we're going to increase patrols in the area. Plainclothes officers will be watching during drop-off and pickup times. And we need you to send a message to all the parents. Make sure they're aware. Make sure they're vigilant." Charlotte looked toward the school building. Through the windows, she could see children sitting at their desks, laughing, learning, completely unaware of the danger that had been so close. Her heart ached with the weight of it. These weren't just students. They were somebody's entire world. "What if he comes back?" she asked quietly. The younger officer met her eyes. "Then we'll be ready." The rest of the day felt like walking through fog. Charlotte stayed at her post, but her nerves were wire-tight. Every car that slowed down, every person who walked past, every shadow that moved just outside her line of sight. She watched them all. The teachers had been briefed. The staff was on alert. Parents received emails and text messages warning them to be extra cautious. Some of them called the office, their voices filled with worry and anger. How could this happen? How could someone get so close? But Charlotte knew the truth. It could happen anywhere, to anyone. All it took was one distracted moment. 1 second of looking away at lunch. She sat in the staff room with a cup of coffee she didn't drink. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying the morning. The way he had watched. The way he had smiled. The way he had moved toward the gate like he belonged there. Mrs. Hernandez, one of the third-grade teachers, sat down across from her. "You saved those girls today, Charlotte. You know that, right?" Charlotte looked up, her eyes tired. "I didn't save anyone. I just did my job." "Your job is to watch a gate," Mrs. Hernandez said gently. "What you did was protect children. There's a difference." Charlotte wanted to believe that, but the knot in her stomach wouldn't go away. That afternoon, as dismissal time approached, Charlotte was back at the gate. The parking lot filled with cars. Parents lined up, their faces tight with concern. Some of them hugged their children a little longer. Some of them asked more questions than usual. Charlotte scanned every face, every vehicle, every corner of the street, and then she saw him again. Not the man from this morning. Someone different. A woman in a red coat, standing near the same spot where the man had been. She was holding a phone, but her eyes weren't on the screen. They were on the children. Charlotte's heart dropped. She grabbed her walkie-talkie, her voice sharp and urgent. "Main office, we have another individual. Female. Red coat. South side of the street." Watching the dismissal, static. Then Principal Dawson's voice. "Are you sure?" Charlotte's eyes didn't leave the woman. "I'm sure." The woman must have sensed the attention. She looked up directly at Charlotte, and then, just like the man, she smiled. Not warm, not innocent. She raised her phone, took a photo, and walked away. Charlotte's blood turned to ice. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Someone was planning something, and Meadowbrook Elementary was the target. The police were back within the hour. This time, there were more of them. 4 officers, 2 detectives, and a specialist from the county's Crimes Against Children unit. The school had become the center of an active investigation. Charlotte sat in Principal Dawson's office, describing everything she had seen. The woman's face, her movements, the way she had deliberately taken that photo before walking away. "Did you notice anything else?" one of the detectives asked, leaning forward. Her name was Detective Maurice, and her eyes were sharp and focused. "Anything unusual about her behavior? The direction she went?" Charlotte closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember. She walked east, toward the community center. She moved quickly, but not like she was running. Like she knew exactly where she was going. Detective Maurice exchanged a look with her partner. "We're going to pull footage from every camera in a 3-block radius. If she's connected to the man from this morning, we'll find the link." "Connected how?" Principal Dawson asked, her voice strained. "Are we talking about a group? An organized operation?" The detective's expression was careful, measured. "We don't know yet. But to people, same location, same pattern of behavior within hours of each other. That's not coincidence." Another message from the district coordinator. More schools had reported sightings. A man and a woman, working together, watching playgrounds, taking photos. Always during arrival or dismissal. Always when the crowds were biggest and attention was divided. "It's happening everywhere," Charlotte said quietly, showing them the message. "They're mapping the schools. Detective Morris read the screen, her jaw tightening. We need to lock this down now. Within an hour, Meadowbrook Elementary had transformed. Police cruisers were parked at every entrance. Officers stood visible and ready. Parents were given updated protocols. No one was allowed to pick up a child without showing identification, even if the staff knew them personally. No one was allowed to wait outside the gates. Charlotte worked side by side with the officers, checking every person who approached. Some parents were frustrated. Some were grateful. All of them were scared. One mother, picking up her kindergartner, grabbed Charlotte's hand as she passed. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for paying attention." Charlotte squeezed her hand back, unable to find words. As the sun began to set, the school finally emptied. The last child was picked up. The last teacher drove away. The building settled into an uneasy quiet. Charlotte sat on the bench near the gate, exhaustion weighing her down. She had been on her feet for over 12 hours. Her back ached. Her mind was cloudy with fatigue. Detective Morris walked over, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Charlotte and sat down beside her. "You're a hero, you know that?" the detective said. Charlotte shook her head. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job is to check IDs and open gates," Detective Morris said. "What you did today was different. You saw something wrong. You trusted your gut. And you didn't hesitate. That's what saved lives." Charlotte looked down at her coffee, her throat tight. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I had looked away. If I had been distracted for just a minute." "But you weren't," Detective Morris said firmly. "And that's what matters." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the shadows grow longer across the empty playground. "Do you think they'll come back?" Charlotte asked. Detective Maurice was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "They always do. People like this don't stop until they're caught. But now we know what we're looking for. Now we're ready." Charlotte's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something told her to pick up. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Then breathing. Slow. Deliberate. And then a voice. Low and cold. "You should have minded your own business." Charlotte's blood froze. "Who is this?" The line went dead. Detective Morris saw the expression on Charlotte's face. "What happened?" Charlotte's hands were shaking. "They know who I am." The detective's face went hard. She grabbed her radio. "We need a trace on this number. Now." She turned to Charlotte. "From this moment on, you're under protection." "We're not taking any chances." Charlotte stared at her phone, her heart hammering in her chest. This wasn't just about the school anymore. It was personal, and whoever was out there, they weren't finished. That night, Charlotte couldn't sleep. She lay in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the voice on the phone over and over. The coldness in those words. The threat behind them. A police officer was stationed outside her building. Detective Maurice had insisted. "Until we know who we're dealing with, you're not alone," she had said. Charlotte appreciated it, but it didn't make her feel safer. If anything, it made everything feel more real. More dangerous. Her phone sat on the nightstand, silent now, but still menacing. The police had traced the call. It came from a burner phone, purchased with cash 3 days ago at a convenience store 40 miles away. No surveillance footage. No leads. Charlotte finally gave up on sleep around 4 in the morning. She made coffee and sat by the window, watching the dark street below. The officer's car was still there, parked under a streetlight. It should have been comforting. Instead, it just reminded her how much danger she was in. Her mind drifted to the children. To those 3 little girls who had been standing by the fence, laughing and unaware. What if she hadn't been paying attention? What if she had been looking at her phone, or talking to someone, or just a few seconds slower? The thought made her sick. When dawn finally broke, Charlotte got ready for work. She wasn't going to hide. She wasn't going to let fear win. Those kids needed her. That school needed her. Detective Maurice called as Charlotte was leaving her apartment. "The trace didn't give us much, but we're analyzing the voice recording." We're also checking social media, local criminal databases, anyone with a history of child-related offenses in the area. Do you think they're watching me? Charlotte asked, stepping outside into the cool morning air. I think they wanted to scare you, Detective Morris said, and I think they're testing to see if you'll back down. I won't. I know, the detective said. That's why we're keeping you protected. When Charlotte arrived at Meadowbrook, the atmosphere had changed. The police presence was even stronger. Parents had been instructed to stay in their cars during drop-off. Teachers were escorting students directly from vehicles to the building. No one lingered. No one took chances. Charlotte took her position at the gate, but this time she wasn't alone. An officer in plain clothes stood nearby, pretending to read a newspaper. Another was positioned across the street, watching from inside an unmarked car. The morning passed without incident. No strangers. No suspicious vehicles. Just the usual rhythm of parents and children, now wrapped in layers of caution and fear. At lunchtime, Principal Dawson called Charlotte into her office. Detective Morris was there along with two other officers Charlotte hadn't met before. We have an update, Detective Morris said. The man from yesterday morning? We identified him. His name is Victor Crane. He has a record. Multiple arrests for stalking, harassment, and one attempted abduction charge that was dropped due to lack of evidence. Charlotte felt her stomach twist. And the woman? We're still working on identifying her. But we pulled traffic camera footage from the area. She got into a van 2 blocks from here. Same van was spotted near 3 other schools this week. So they're working together, Charlotte said. Looks that way, Detective Morris confirmed. And here's the thing. The van was registered to a shell company. Fake address. No real owner. These people are organized. They're planning something big. Principal Dawson's face was pale. What do? We set a trap, Detective Morris said, her voice firm. They've shown interest in this school. They've made contact with Charlotte. They're going to come back. And when they do, we'll be ready. Charlotte's heart raced. You want to use me as bait? Detective Morris met her eyes. Only if you're willing. We'll have officers everywhere. You'll never be in real danger. But if they think they have an opportunity, they might make a move. And that's when we get them. Charlotte's hands were shaking. Every part of her wanted to say no, to walk away, to let someone else take the risk. But then she thought about those little girls again. About all the children who came through these gates every day, trusting that the adults around them would keep them safe. What do I need to do? She asked. The plan was set for the next afternoon during dismissal. Charlotte would be at her usual post, but seemingly alone. The visible police presence would be reduced, making it look like security had relaxed. In reality, officers would be hidden everywhere, watching, waiting. They'll see what looks like an opportunity, Detective Maurice explained. And when they take it, we close in. Charlotte went home that night with her mind spinning. She couldn't tell her family, couldn't tell her friends. She just had to trust that the police knew what they were doing. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling again. Tomorrow, everything would come to a head. Tomorrow, she would either help catch the people threatening her school, or she would become their next target. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Charlotte's breath caught. She almost didn't answer. But she needed to know. Hello? Heavy breathing. Then that same cold voice. Tomorrow. We'll see how brave you really are. The line went dead. Charlotte sat up, her heart pounding. They knew. They knew about the plan, and they were coming anyway. Charlotte called Detective Maurice immediately. Within minutes, the detective was at her apartment, listening to the recording of the call. Her expression was dark and focused. You're confident, Detective Maurice said. Too confident. That means they think they have the upper hand. Or they're desperate, Charlotte said quietly. Maybe they know this is their last chance. Either way, we proceed as planned, the detective said. But we increase the response team. Double the backup. I'm not taking any risks with your safety. The next morning arrived too quickly. Charlotte barely slept. She got dressed, drank coffee she couldn't taste, and drove to the school with a police escort following close behind. The day felt impossibly long. Every hour dragged by like days. Teachers whispered in the hallways. Students sensed something was wrong, even if they didn't know what. The air was thick with tension. Finally, dismissal time came. Charlotte took her position at the front gate. The visible police presence had been reduced, just as planned. To anyone watching, it would look like security had relaxed. Like the coast was clear, but Charlotte knew the truth. Officers were positioned in unmarked vehicles throughout the parking lot. Plainclothes detectives were scattered among the parents. Sharpshooters were on the roof of the building across the street. Every angle was covered. Parents began arriving. Cars lined up. Children poured out of the building, laughing and chattering, unaware that they were at the center of a carefully orchestrated operation. Charlotte's eyes scanned every face, every vehicle. Her heart hammered in her chest. Her hand rested near the panic button on her belt, ready to signal if anything went wrong. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Nothing unusual. No strangers. No suspicious vehicles. Charlotte's walkie-talkie crackled. Detective Maurice's voice came through, low and steady. Stay alert. They might be waiting for the crowd to thin out. Charlotte nodded, even though no one could see her. She kept watching, kept waiting, and then she saw it. The white van, pulling slowly into the far end of the parking lot. Tinted windows. No plates. Charlotte's blood ran cold. She pressed the button on her walkie-talkie. White van. Northeast corner. No plates. We see it, Detective Morris responded. Hold your position. The van stopped, idled. No one got out. Charlotte's pulse pounded in her ears. Parents continued picking up their children, completely unaware of what was happening. Then the side door of the van slid open. The woman in the red coat stepped out. She looked directly at Charlotte. He smiled that same cold smile. And then Victor Crane stepped out behind her. Charlotte's breath stopped. They were both here, together, in broad daylight. They started walking toward the word of school, casual, confident, like they belonged there. Charlotte moved to intercept, her voice firm. Stop right there. This is private property. They kept walking. The woman pulled something from her pocket. For a terrifying second, Charlotte thought it was a weapon. But it was just a piece of paper. We're here to pick up a student, the woman said, her voice sickeningly sweet. We're on the authorized list. I need to see identification, Charlotte said, standing her ground. Victor Crane smiled. Of course, he reached into his jacket. Everything happened at once. Officers emerged from everywhere. Vehicles screeched forward. Voices shouted, police. Hands where we can see them. Victor's hand froze. His expression shifted from confidence to panic. The woman tried to run, but officers were already on her, taking her to the ground. Charlotte stepped back as chaos erupted. Parents screamed, pulling their children close. Teachers rushed forward, ushering students back into the building. Within seconds, both Victor and the woman were in handcuffs. Their faces pressed against the pavement. Detective Morris was at Charlotte's side immediately. Are you okay? Charlotte could barely speak. She nodded, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. The officers searched the van. What they found made Charlotte's stomach turn. Zip ties. Duct tape. A map with 6 schools marked in red. Photos of children, dozens of them. They were building a network, Detective Morris said later, after the scene had been secured. They were identifying targets, planning abductions. You stopped them before they could take a single child. Charlotte sat on the bench by the gate, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her. Parents came up to her, one after another, thanking her, crying, hugging her. She had saved their children. She had saved their entire world. Principal Dawson sat beside her, tears streaming down her face. You're a hero, Charlotte. A real hero. Charlotte looked out at the playground, now empty and quiet. She thought about all the mornings she had stood at this gate, all the children she had smiled at, all the ordinary moments that had led to this extraordinary day. I just paid attention, she said softly. That's all. I just paid attention. 3 weeks later, the story hit the news. Victor Crane and his accomplice, a woman named Lisa Morrow, were charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, stalking, and multiple other offenses. The investigation revealed they had been targeting schools across 3 counties, looking for opportunities to abduct children for a trafficking ring, because Charlotte had noticed, because she had trusted her instincts, because she had refused to look away. They were stopped before they could hurt anyone. Meadowbrook Elementary held a ceremony in Charlotte's honor. The mayor came. The police chief spoke. Parents stood and applauded until their hands hurt. But Charlotte didn't feel like a hero. She just felt grateful. Grateful that she had been there. Grateful that she had paid attention. Grateful that those children were safe. Because in the end, that's what it takes. Not superpowers. Not special training. Just awareness. Just caring. Just one person who refuses to let something wrong go unnoticed. Charlotte stood at her gate the next morning, watching the children arrive. Their laughter filled the air. Their smiles brightened the world, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would never stop watching, never stop protecting, never stop being the guard who noticed the stranger, because that's what love looks like. That's what courage looks like. And that's what keeps the world safe, one morning at a time.